Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast, recorded on Sunday due to Purdue's basketball schedule yesterday and other things. And we thank you for joining us. We want to thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel and the 811 Restaurant. We appreciate them as well as their sponsorship of this program, and all of you that become pretty frequent viewers and listeners. We're grateful for you as well, and happy holidays to everybody down the line. All right, Brian, we'll start with Saturday's win over Butler, the just common theme that you talked about, and seemed to me, even sitting in the stands, that Purdue got its mojo back a little bit and really had a pretty commanding performance in its win over Butler.
Yeah, I thought, they were really good offensively again, but they were even better defensively. And I know Butler was shorthanded. I don't know how much that had to do with anything. They weren't down that many players from the team that won at Oklahoma a few games sooner, which was no small feat. A few games earlier, not a few games sooner. That made absolutely no sense. I thought Purdue was really good defensively. They looked more engaged, I think, than they have in a lot of other games this season. And they certainly looked more engaged than they looked out in New York and New Jersey. And I think that was, the important part of this game was showing that the things that were slipping on Purdue, if not having never been in a position to slip this season, I thought those things, they really shored up some of those things. They took good care of the basketball. They defended better than they have, I think, just about all season. And I think for Purdue to show that their struggles out east obviously mattered to them, and they were self-aware enough and self-reflective enough to course correct in terms of those things and come out and play better after a couple of days of practice. I think that kind of said something about them. And if they are able to defend, maybe not this effectively, but this way, the rest of the season, I think they can have a fantastic season. That was the biggest thing out of this game for me, how they communicated with one another, how they were on top of the details, how just engaged they seemed to be defensively. That was not something that really defined them through games 1 through 7.
Yeah, Brian, I guess early on, just from a personnel standpoint, it'd be interesting to know maybe who you think the biggest early season surprise player has been for Purdue.
I'm thinking. I don't know if any of these guys have really surprised me. I think Caleb First obviously had, for the better part of the season, has played like a veteran. You normally anticipate freshmen having some sort of acclimation period where they struggle and they look like kids out there. I don't know if he's ever had. Obviously, he's had some matchups that have relegated him to a secondary role in some of these games lately. He's obviously had to make quite a transition from a defensive perspective, but I think for the better part of the season, Caleb First has been rock solid. And anytime you have a freshman and you can use the term rock solid to describe them, that player is doing a damn good job for you, especially on a team this good, where that player is walking into surroundings where everybody's played together before, and you're the only one who, is learning as you go, really. Now, obviously, everybody's still learning, but he's the one who came into the summer not knowing anything. So I guess if I had to pick one, I would pick him. I thought Isaiah Thompson would have a really good year. I thought he would shoot the ball really well this year. He is. I thought Zach Edey would be really good this year. He is. Brandon Newman hasn't quite clicked for him yet on a consistent basis. I think that surprises me a little bit in the opposite direction. I thought Eric Hunter would shoot the ball a little bit better than he has so far. Obviously, it's a long season. He's got plenty of time to get back on the right side of that. Another pleasant surprise, I think, Ethan Morton. He was the one guy where if you looked at this roster on paper, who's at risk here of being, the 10th man in a 9-man rotation? I think it probably would have been Ethan Morton, not because he's not good enough to help them, but because you just didn't know where he fit in with so many experienced guards on this team. But he has really been kind of a plug and play sort of guy. Whatever Purdue's needed on any given night, he's been able to do. He's defended better than I think I anticipated him defending. He's been good with the basketball. He's made them a better offensive basketball team at times. He's made shots when shots have come his way. He's very quietly shooting a nice percentage on low volume from 3-point range. I just think he's been an instrumental part of Purdue's success. So I guess I'd mention him too. Mason Gillis, I thought he'd have a really good year. He's played really well since coming back. I'm trying to not just run down the whole roster here. But if I had to pick two pleasant surprises, I would go with Caleb first, and I would go with Ethan Morton as the two who really jump out to me.
Yeah, I thought it was important yesterday. And again, from a sitting in the stands perspective, also that not that Zach Edey has played poorly at all, but that he had a really strong game yesterday and did the things he had to do and did them well. Again, I'm probably overplaying that, that dynamic between him and Travion Williams, but they're still, boy, you're just going to be hard pressed to find anybody, any duo or any position at that in the country that's doing more than those two guys are.
Well, the issue for Zach Edey has been, it's not so much that he's not playing well. It's just he was kind of getting off to slow starts.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that there's naturally some pressure there where you tip the ball off, you're out there, and all of a sudden your team is relying on you more than anyone else on the floor to get them off to a good start. And, sometimes bringing guys off the bench can alleviate a little bit of that pressure. You saw Matt Painter make that kind of move with Matt Harms years ago. Maybe it helped him, maybe it didn't. I don't know, but Purdue obviously went on to have a great season. But I just think it's been so important for Purdue to get off to good starts. And for whatever reason, it hasn't seemed to me like Edey's been as physical to start games as he is to finish games, things like that. And I just think it made all the sense in the world to go with a veteran early, a guy who's accustomed to, having his team hoisted on his shoulders. Probably nobody for many years now at Purdue has had that happen more than Travion Williams. They've relied on him more than most any player that's come through this program the last few years. It just made sense to rely on Travion Williams to get you off to that good start. Let Zach Edey come in off the bench and take advantage of Travion Williams having kicked their heads in for 4 minutes the way Edey was doing for Williams before. And maybe it just takes a little bit of burden off Edey, lets him ease into the game a little bit. I think when you're averaging what Zach Edey's been averaging all season long, I think when you view that productivity as, not playing well, I think that tells you what kind of player you're dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
This is still a pretty remarkable player Purdue has here. It's just the fact that he's just not been able to, to get off to great starts. And that, was part of Purdue's struggles the last few games. And I think that might have been an easy fix because the Travion Williams in the starting lineup thing might help alleviate that issue, might take a little bit of burden off Zach Edey, and might make Purdue a better basketball team in an enduring matter here.
Tom, you can ask one quick comment. Yeah, the fact that NC State 9 points in 12 minutes, and that's a bad performance for Edey. I mean, that's my poor logic or my too much of an armchair. I agree with you very much on that. He hasn't played poorly. He just has. So anyway, Tom, not to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, Matt Painter's been vocal about this, Brian. I'm not sure if I've heard your thoughts on the end of the Crossroads Classic. Where do you stand in seeing this event come to a close after 11 years?
Yeah, I think it was a cool event. I think it did. It was good for the fans. I think it was good for the schools involved. I think it was a good deal for Indiana basketball, the state of Indiana basketball. I get where people are coming from. It was restrictive from a scheduling perspective, especially now that you've got those two Big Ten games in early December. It does tie your hands a little bit from a scheduling perspective, but I just don't think that this was something that needed to be sacrificed for the good of all of the schools involved. I think Indiana obviously is the driving force behind this ending. I think they've been kind of had one foot out the door for a long time now. Largely because they feel like they can schedule more nationally prominent events, which is fine. I mean, do what you want to do, but you better get those nationally prominent events. But also you need to understand that you are Indiana because of the state of Indiana. Your history is tied to this state. And when your history is tied to players from the state of Indiana, your history is tied to your fan base who is centralized in the state of Indiana. And when you start to think you're bigger than the state of Indiana, when when you start to think bigger than the state of Indiana in terms of the best interest of your program, I think you're getting away from what made you into what you are. And you need to be really careful in that regard, because, you perceive yourself to be, and obviously no one would disagree that Indiana is a blue blood level program with as good a history as anybody in college basketball, but you are that because of the state of Indiana. And I think this was, even if it maybe wasn't the biggest moneymaker for you, even if you had to split the gate in a manner that probably wasn't equitable in terms of the number of fans you brought there, even if this cost you an opportunity to go to the Champions Classic or whatever it was a few years back, which Tom Green made a big stink about behind the scenes, even if all those things are true, you are this program that would have theoretical access to these nationally prominent events because of what the state of Indiana has helped you become. And I just think it's something Indiana needs to be really careful about, not thinking they're too good for the state that made them what they are.
Well, Brian, real quick, how's Purdue replace this event, you think?
Well, they're going to be ambitious about it. I know they're trying to get something meaningful. What that would be, I have no idea. I'm sure they've talked about a lot of neutral site types of things. I'm sure they've talked to a lot of regional, prominent regional programs and whatnot, but I just don't know what you're going to get that would replace the natural fit that comes with Butler and Notre Dame. Whether Butler and Notre Dame would have interest in doing home and homes with Purdue, I don't know. I think Butler probably would more than Notre Dame. But that being said, I totally get why Notre Dame wants out of this or isn't interested in continuing it, is because Notre Dame's fans don't even live here. This was a cool thing for the fans. This was a good opportunity for fans to go to Indy, do their Christmas shopping, spend a whole day watching basketball, see 4 teams in the span of 4 hours. And that's the other part of it too. Indiana's fan base is part of its organizational strength. And this was a cool thing for their fans that they're now sort of taking away. How their fans would perceive that, I don't know. I know fans want great games too, and fans are probably excited about their Kansas series. But I get why Notre Dame would want out of this, because Notre Dame got the least out of this. Their fans don't live here. Their recruiting base isn't necessarily Indiana. They're an ACC program, things like that. So I get that. But that doesn't mean Purdue and Notre Dame might not be able to pair up for kind of a one-off home and home every now and then. But I would think like the Cincinnatis, the Xaviers, the Louisvilles, wouldn't it be funny if Purdue got Kentucky?
Yeah, it's possible.
I know Purdue's always pretty ambitious from a scheduling perspective, that they want to play really good teams. It's just a matter of making it work. I don't know how eager people are going to be to come to Mackey Arena. I'm sure Purdue, would be willing to go to other people's places, but it would have to be an equitable deal. It would have to work within whatever happens with the Gavitt games, whatever happens with the Big Ten ACC Challenge, whatever happens with their exempt events for a few years. Purdue's in PK 85 next year, which is obviously a big time event. So I don't know if you necessarily need to play another blue blood type of team next year, but I think you would like to play a road game. So maybe I don't know. I don't really have any specifics on what Purdue's talked about. I know they've talked about a lot of different things with a lot of different people, but Purdue's going to try to get something meaningful here. They're not going to go schedule, another SC Upstate or something like that. They're not going to schedule somebody who's just there to fill out the season ticket package. Obviously, this time of year, you got to play the Incarnate Words and you got to play the Nickel States and whatnot just to fill out your season ticket package, just to get enough games in. But Purdue's going to want those 6 or 7, 4 or 5, whatever the number would be, really meaningful non-conference foundational games between their exempt event, when they're in Gavitt, Big Ten ACC, and then something else on top of that. So it will be something meaningful. I can assure you that.
Yeah, meaningful for Purdue this year too, though. That to the bottom, if Purdue can be a number 1 seed, they might be able to play the first couple rounds in Indianapolis, and then I think they could go to Chicago. And I don't have it committed to memory yet, but it's a real good path. And that's the thing I like about it, is it really is an NCAA type environment to some, for one game and all the other things that go with it. As I always use the line that Everett Stevens talks on the Purdue video. It's a monument to basketball. To me, that has got a lot of value. And like Brian said, it should have value for IU. I agree with Brian on Notre Dame. It may not make any sense for them, but for the other three schools, they really love to have that state of Indiana basketball feel to it. And I personally, too bad it's going to go away.
Let me add something else about scheduling here real quick, if I could. Matt Painter's been one of the, I know this for a fact, Matt Painter's been one of the foremost voices in the Big Ten and trying to talk all of his other coaches in the Big Ten into scheduling up for the sake of gaming the computers with it for NCAA tournament selection, to try to have those years in the Big Ten every year where you got 10 teams in the NCAA tournament. That's a matter of scheduling well, but also not scheduling, the 300 plus net ranking teams. And I know there've been at least two coaches in the Big Ten over the years who brushed back against that because their fans have needed them to win games. And neither of those coaches are in their jobs anymore. Mark Turgeon and Archie Miller.
In case you're wondering.
They just needed to get their fans off their asses by winning games, regardless of who they were playing. But that's been one of Matt Painter's big crusades with the Big Ten is make sure you're scheduling in a way that will get us all into the NCAA tournament, that will help all of our strength of schedules, stop scheduling, Chicago State and SC Upstate and, whoever else. And start just, obviously we're all going to be playing bye games, but go get respectable bye games and go play good opponents. And that's been his mentality about this whole thing. And that's the mentality Purdue's going to take into trying to find who they replace the Crossroads Classic with.
Was it an incarnate word on Monday night? Carson Cunningham's team, Nichols played Wisconsin tough, right? So at least you have to have your antennas up just a little bit in those situations. Is that right? Is that not right? Am I wrong on
No.
Nichols in Wisconsin?
Purdue, yeah. They played them. They played them pretty tough, yeah. But Purdue's not going to have any trouble.
No, I agree with that. I'm just saying you're right. You got to fill out the schedule, and you got to have holiday games, and it'll be a full house in Mackey Arena these next two games as well, because can't get tickets to when the students aren't there. The general public are getting tickets to those games and buying them up in droves. One other question. We'll go to some football, Brian. Just a week. You saw Miles Colvin last night. Drayvon Gibbs Lawhorn also commits. Comments on that. It's kind of an open-ended question, but both guys are going to be the future of this program in that 23 class. A big week, really, to get that kind of commitment for Matt Painter, but we haven't. You've talked about it in other of our platforms, but give us a little bit on both those guys.
Yeah, Drayvon Gibbs Lawhorn is a scorer. He's that guy that Purdue's best teams have kind of had from an ability perspective, whether that's a Carson Edwards or whether that's a Jaden Ivey. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form he's going to be as good as either of those guys, but he's sort of that sort of scorer, just a guy who knows how to score, a crafty offensive player who's got some dynamic qualities to him, things like that. He's got a lot of energy, both as a player and as a person. He's a pretty live wire sort of dude. And I think that he's the sort of player you need to put a lot of stable complementary pieces around. But if you're able to do that, he's a guy who can do that one very important job for you. And I'm speaking as somebody who views scoring as a role, as a role. I think he can be a really effective, scorer for Purdue long term. I think Miles Colvin is a guy with, a very, very bright future. I think he's an elite athlete. I think he's got a lot of game to him. I think he probably, needs some seasoning as a basketball player, needs to, to get acclimated to some really highly competitive environments, some really, really defined structure at Purdue. But once he does those things, I think, he's got all the tools in the world to be a great player, a versatile player, a guy who in man-to-man defense should be a really good player. a guy with just a lot of talent, a lot of raw ability, and a guy who's got a chance. To be honest with you, I don't say this about high school juniors very often. I don't say this about high school players, period, very often, but a guy who's got a chance to play basketball for a very long time. I think it was really important for Purdue coming off this 2022 class to add, some raw athleticism and some raw talent to this team, because I think the 2022 class, not to be reductive about what they're capable of doing, I think they're more complementary guys than they are, centerpiece type of guys. I think Fletcher Lawyer can be a really good player at the college level. I think Braden Smith can be a very good player at the college level. But I think by and large, they're guys who you need to put around other great players for their value to really come out. And I think with Miles Coleman and Draven Gibbs-Lawhorn, I think you've gotten a really, really important dose of really high-end athleticism, but also some real raw ability here too.
Yeah. Tom, let's switch to football as a not a throw-in but you had a week of practice, and obviously National Signing Day this past week, and the transfer portal continues to be a story. But Purdue's going to have a couple practices this week as they get ready to play Tennessee at the Music City Bowl on December 30th. Thoughts and feelings where things are. It's you're in the middle of practice. I get that, but what do you see heading into this game? Obviously, Purdue without George Karlaftis and David Bell, also a development of this past week.
Yeah, how about George Karlaftis graduated, guys? I don't know if you saw that
yesterday. Yeah, good for him.
Those guys, him and Rondell Moore, 3 years, 6 semesters. I'm sure some summers were sprinkled in there, but I needed every bit of all my time at Purdue.
Yeah, we got 2 West Lafayette graduates, and he beat us. He beat us, didn't he, Tom? To that.
Yeah, he did. So hats off to he graduated. I know Eric Miller did, Jalen Alexander, and a few other Boilermakers did here this weekend. So again, that's just awesome, man. Yeah, Alan. They're deep in the thick of practices. We've got access at least Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this coming week. So we'll have some stuff on the site leading into Christmas and whatnot. The Boilers are going to fly down to Nashville on the 26th, and then we'll pick up with our coverage down in Music City on the 27th through the 30th, which you talked about. So, yeah, boy, a lot going on. If you follow the site, you follow Brian and myself, between, you said, Alan, recruiting for the high school kids, the transfer portal guys, the practices for the bowl and whatnot, it's been a lot of stuff going on with football in particular as well. So, yeah, it seems to be so far so good. Young guys are getting a lot of looks. And, the team's starting to prepare. We talked a little bit last week about what they're going to face in Tennessee. That offense, there's a lot of intrigue there to get a look at that volunteer offense. It goes at a breakneck pace. How will Purdue deal with that? How will Tennessee deal with Purdue's offense? How will Purdue deal with life without David Bell? So, yeah, there's some interesting storylines. And I think I said this before too, guys. I don't think there'll be a lack of motivation for either of these two teams.
Right, I agree.
Again, so often that's what you hear these guys on TV say when you're watching the game. Well, I'm not so sure School X really wanted to be here. Well, again, I think these are two programs on similar upward trajectories, coming off very invigorating and exciting seasons for their fan bases. So I think, again, that's a cocktail for what could be one of the better non-marquee bowl matchups of this holiday season.
Yeah, the line is still under a touchdown going to be it'll be a lot of orange there certainly, and it'll be a tough environment for Purdue from that standpoint. But we'll have a lot more of that as we get ready. Okay, so programming note: we will have a show next week. We may record it a day or two before Christmas Day, which will be Saturday. It's hard. It gets so screwed up on the calendar this time of year, and then obviously Tom will be making his way to Nashville. Brian will have men's basketball. I said the Boilermakers take on Incarnate Word on Monday night. Then they play Nichols on the 29th. A game I think it's scheduled to start at 5:00, and then back into Big Ten basketball January 3rd against Wisconsin. So it's going to heat up big time, and that part of it will be a lot of fun. Want to thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel and the 811 Restaurant. Also, a reminder to you, looking for a last-minute gift, you can certainly subscribe to GoldandBlack.com. We'll have there's information on the site of how to do so. We appreciate all of our subscribers and viewers. YouTube, we've had a tremendous following of late, and that's been great as well. We appreciate you so much. So have a great rest of your Sunday or whenever you're listening or watching this, and have a great week and celebrate the holidays well. Thank you all for listening and watching.